Hey guys, La here from Facebook's D&D Memes, coming at you with another Miniature Minute, and this time I'd like to talk about useful sets of miniatures to have as a serious dungeon master who wants to use miniatures in his game. So collections that you would form to bring some really classic monsters into your tabletop game. I'm going to do 10 categories. They're not really ranked in any particular order, but they're ones that I find are really useful to have around when trying to bring a lot to the board. So I'm going to start with Lizardfolk. Lizardfolk are a classic, cool monster from D&D. They're brutal, they're scary looking, I love them. And one thing I like to do with sets of miniatures like this is make sure I have a couple that are a little bit bigger or scarier or just different looking, like archers or spellcasters in each set. So here's a few examples of some of my favorite ones. These are Reaper Lizardfolk. These are ones I painted a little while back. And as you can see, this guy, he's a good head taller than the others. He's a little bit more imposing. So he would be really fun to use as a general or a leader of a unit in a big fight against Lizardfolk. Back here we've got Wizards, Lizardfolk Rogues. Very classic, no weapons. They look really cool, nice colors. For a little variety, there's Wizards Troglodyte Bone Crushers. They're pretty cool. They got armor and big clubs. Here's some Reaper Kobolds I painted a while back. I am including Kobolds in this category because, let's face it, they're pretty much tiny lizard folk. Those are always great for low-level encounters, especially if you want to have a bunch on the board. All different types of weapons. My favorite Kobold miniatures are Wizards Kobold Champions. They've got savage little swords and big shields and lots of armor. So if I wanted even higher-level party members to fight Kobolds and not have them just be trash mobs, I might throw down something kind of like this. And then of course I've got some Kobold Sorcerers, because having some spellcasters on the board is a great way to kind of mess with your party. Throw them for a loop. Next I'm going to talk about animals. Now it's pretty obvious why you would have animals in a D&D campaign, whether you're traveling in a forested area, or you have a druid in the party, or your party rides around on horses a lot. There's a lot of reasons you might want to represent them on the board. Here's a few examples of some. We've got some Reaper Dire Rats. They're unpainted, I know. It drives me nuts too. Those are great classic low-level monsters, Dire Rats in every tavern cellar. We've got some Celestial Black Bears. Those are a nice medium-sized bear miniature. I've got a Fiendish Dire Badger and a Fiendish Dire Weasel, both Wizards miniatures. Great for any kind of large rodent. I can't overemphasize how much versatility you can get out of some good wolf miniatures. In the front, we've got the Wizards Timberwolves, and then right behind them, Pathfinder Wolf. They're great for a myriad of D&D creatures, whether they be hellhounds or hunting dogs or wargs. You can get a lot of use out of some wolves. They have a good place on the miniature shelf. There's a Pathfinder Bodak. This would be great for any kind of really big lizard, an alligator, Komodo dragon, what have you. A couple of Fiendish Serpents. Those are Wizards of the Coast, just nice for big snakes. And then we've got a trio of some dire animals. We've got a Blessed Hunter, which is basically just a dire lion, Wizards Dire Bear, and Pathfinder Dire Boar. Again, a lot of versatility for really big, scary monster creatures. These are actually some Mage Knight horses. I have a lot of horses because I tend to use them pretty frequently, but these are nice looking ones. I just snapped them off the base. And right behind them is also some Mage Knight miniatures. I don't remember what they were called, but I use them as axe beaks. If you remember those classic D&D monsters, these are pretty much what an axe beak is. So it's nice to have some variety of mounts for your party to ride around on. So those are the animals. And next up we've got Orcs and Goblinoids. Let's face it, we've all faced these guys a million times. Orcs and Goblins, they find their way into just about every D&D game. They are classic. There's a lot of different companies that make good miniatures for them as well. For some goblins I like to use, these are actually Warhammer Night Goblins. I haven't painted them in a long time, so still in their original gray, but they look really good on the field. They got big creepy hoods and big pointy noses. I think that's classic goblin stuff. Behind them I've got some Lord of the Rings goblins, and I like these because some of them have bows, and as I said earlier, I like to have some archers that I can put down in different spots on the field to represent that they're firing ranged. Then I've got some Lord of the Rings orcs also with bows. Those are cool because it's good to have some orc archers in the background while the big strong ones are up front, ripping the party to pieces. I got a couple varieties of Pathfinder hobgoblins, and I like hobgoblin miniatures because I think they work really well as orcs also. They're pretty much the same size and they tend to kind of fight in the same style. So those are pretty cool. Some hobgoblin soldiers. Right behind them I've got some wizard hobgoblins. Those are pretty cool. I like the way that they have, you know, really contrasting armor and color scheme. They pop on the field. Some wizards, orc soldiers. And then in the background, I've got some Reaper bugbears, which do fall into the Goblinoid category. I'm pretty happy with how the paint job on these guys turned out, and they're just really big, imposing, nice-looking miniatures. And as I said, I like to have some kind of big, boss-looking ones to be the generals or chiefs. So I've got this one, the bigger bugbear, and then in the front I've got the orc champion, which would be great to lead a group of goblins, orcs, or hobgoblins. Got his big axe and his fur cloak. One of my favorite orc miniatures that Wizards came out with. So orcs and goblinoids, having a lot of them is important because that's where their strength tends to lie, is being in massive numbers. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the more militaristic non-human races. Now, I'm sure this sounds a little crazy, but I have separate categories of miniatures for PCs and things that people would fight more as NPCs or enemies, specifically with elves and dwarves and the like. You know, dwarven miniatures and elven miniatures, you can tell which one's going to be the hero and which one's just going to be a soldier on the battlefield. A few examples, we've got some of the Wizards of the Coast, dwarven soldiers, some dwarven clerics right behind them, then a couple more interesting kind of dwarven hero-looking guys, and I would totally, you know, have a player use one of these because they're a bit more interesting, but they make great, you know, again, generals or leaders on the battlefield. This one's actually Pathfinder, this one Wizards of the Coast. Then I've got some Warhammer elves. These would be kind of your classic high elf style, metal armor, swords and shields, fancy helmets. And then we've got some more of your classic kind of wood elf style elves. These ones are wizards. Then again, I've got one in each group that's sort of looking like a leader of that band. And then in the back, I've got some dark elves. I really like using dark elves and the Underdark in my games. These are Warhammer Corsairs from the Dark Elven Army. They really stand out in color. These are some that I painted. And I like them because they're fairly, you know, androgynous in appearance, which is great for dark elves because they have just as many ladies on the battlefield, if not more, as their, you know, leaders and high priestesses. Then a few archers, of course, some dark elves with crossbows, because ranged versatility on the battlefield is a good way to ruin your players' lives. Now, in the realm of non-PC human miniatures, I find the two most common categories I tend to field are soldiers and brigands. Over here on this side, in the front, I've got some different Pathfinder rogues, kind of cut purse brigands. I like having them that match up. Really nice enemies for a party to fight in a city, a thieves guild. These ones are all wizards. They all definitely look like they're cut purses and brigands. They all have a little bit of character to them. And then in the back I've got some Warhammer archers. Those definitely look like roadside brigands to me, like you're kind of Robin Hood style, stealing from wagons and chariots. And again, little archery on the board is always fun. Over here I've got a bunch of soldiers. Now these would be great for city guards, or if you have to field some kind of war where there's an army that would really go to war with their armor and weapons at bear. In the front here, this is the classic 3rd edition iconic character, Regdar. His miniature got to be really common, so I have a bunch of them. And I use them as city guards or soldiers all the time. A little more variety in the back. There's some Pathfinder City Watch, some men-at-arms. And then these guys in the back are definitely kind of the patrols you'd see around the city wall. The Night Watchman, and then a Royal Guard is kind of, you know, a general or cooler looking dude. So I try to collect a lot of these kind of things, because if I need to field an actual battlefield with an army on it, I try to get as close as I can to simulating that through miniatures, because I'm insane. Next, we have every high-level necromancer's favorite cannon fodder, hordes of undead. Now, the two most important that I find to get versatility out of are skeletons and zombies. Now, I'm not really including bigger, badder, scarier undead in this category, like wraiths or ghosts or shadows. These are just kind of your corporeal, classic, summoned with high-level spell undead. Now, I've got some Reaper zombies right here. They're great. They have dynamic poses. They're lightweight. They're inexpensive. You get a bunch of them. Really good zombies. Definitely need to get painted. I'm still slapping myself on the wrist for every unpainted miniature I'm showing you. Right behind them, we've got some Warhammer zombies. A lot of D&D players at some point have tried Warhammer. If you ever had any old armies, I personally did Undead for a while because I knew I would use their miniatures in D&D. They're pretty good. They've got pitchforks. They look like they're farmers that just kind of popped up out of the ground. They've got scythes. Behind those are some Reaper ghouls. Ghouls, another classic, a little bit stronger undead that might be good to have several to put down, or if you need to use them as zombies, or vice versa. You could definitely use some of these zombies as ghoul miniatures. I've got a few Reaper mummies, also work for zombies. Any other kind of stronger undead you might want to throw down, or mummies themselves. Behind those, some of my favorites, my Warhammer skeletons. Had them for a very long time, painted them ages ago. They still look pretty cool. They look great on a D&D battlefield, and it's good to just have a big scoop of skeletons to dump down on the field when you need to have an undead army. And behind those are some Reaper skeletons. I love them. They're very dynamic. They bring a lot of different weapons to the table. Again, we got a little archer in there, and they all look like they have their own personality, and that can be kind of fun for the players. And again, it's kind of fun to throw in some bosses, so I just kind of took a big Death Knight-looking guy. Maybe he's the leader of these undead. You never know. You hope you don't meet him on the battlefield. Another great kind of enemy for DMs to have at their disposal are vermin. Most of what I have on the board here are spiders, and more spiders. And you know what? I just keep finding reasons to use them, and they always freak the party out. No one really likes spiders that much. I've got some Reaper bone spiders. In the middle here, I've got a variety of Pathfinder, some giant centipedes and beetles, one of their spiders. These guys are wizards' mad slashers. They're kind of spidery looking, but I've also used them as giant crabs or different kinds of insects. I've got some metal Reaper spiders over here, some Warhammer bats flying in the back. They're pretty cool looking. I've got a bat swarm. Swarms are great. Swarms are not the friend of every fighter. Got some Reaper bones, scorpions, and spiders here. You know, I like to have a variety of size of spiders. When they get, higher level, they're going to stop fighting these little guys and start facing these guys. And then in the back, just for fun, I've got a little rust monster, or as Reaper calls him, an oxidation beast. Very clever. So vermin, insectoids, you can use them as all kinds of stuff. Again, like giant crabs. Or if you put down a big spider and say it's a scorpion, I'm not going to get too mad at you. It still represents the archetype pretty well. Next, I've got a category that's kind of strange, but I'm just going to call it Beastmen. Most specifically on the board here, we've got gnolls. Now, I love gnolls. I think they're my favorite D&D monster of all time. I always love running them. I think they're awesome and terrifying and just really mean, and I love putting the party up against them. So I've got a lot of gnoll miniatures. I've got some of these classic kind of gnolls up front here, and these I actually get a lot of utility out of. Now, I could use these as werewolves. I've used this one as a hound archon, any kind of big anthropomorphic beast man. They look good and they work. For some reason, I seem to have gotten more utility out of these Baz Draconians than any other type of miniature I have in a unit. I've used them as humanoids wearing masks. I've used them as medium demons. I've used them as smaller gnolls. They work for so many things. They've got kind of ram-like heads, cool armor, cool poses. I find them great for all kinds of enemies. I've got some Kenku and some catfolk for kind of your other half-human, half-animal critters. I've got some wizards gnolls in the back here. This one's actually an old chainmail gnoll that's missing his arm. And then I've got some gnoll archers, also from wizards. That's great to have some archery on the field. In the back, just an array of Reaper bones gnolls I've not yet painted, but I'm very excited to do so. We got some lycanthropes, some werebears, and a werewolf. That werewolf, I believe, is actually another Mage Knight one that's been snapped off his base and glued onto a normal-sized one. And then I've got this Warlord's big bad wolf guy. I've used him as a gnoll leader or even just a hill giant werewolf, whatever have you. He looks really cool. He's a great thing to have in charge of all these beastmen. So I find a lot of use for these, and when you get higher level, these are the kind of enemies you'll see in high numbers, which is pretty impressive. And next up we have the big, the bad, the scary giants, trolls, and ogres. I'm going to kind of lump them all into the same category. They're all, giant type. Now this is kind of a weird one to have a large quantity of because one, they're such large miniatures, and two, it's pretty intimidating to throw your party up against lots and lots of these things. But as parties progress and your campaign goes on, they're going to be able to face, 3 or 4 trolls at a time. So some of my favorites are these guys over here are some Mage Knight miniatures that have been broken off their bases and put on normal ones. Actually, this one, to give you an example, is still on his original Mage Knight base. I think these guys make really cool, spooky looking trolls. Got really good poses, big bellies and claws. Behind them are some other Mage Knight ones I snapped off. They make great, stone giants or ogres. In the back, I've got some Pathfinder ogres, and then a Reaper ogre that's kind of half painted. I've got an Etten right here in the center. This is from one of the first Pathfinder plastic minis that came out. I really like this Etten miniature. He's huge. He takes up a lot of his base. He's imposing. In the back, there's just a variety of giants. I've got some Cloud Giant, Storm Giant, Fire Giant going on, and I like Storm Giants and Cloud Giant miniatures because they look like they could work for either. If you put down a Cloud Giant and tell me it's a Storm Giant, you have not shattered my disbelief at all. And then there's some trolls. Now, we've got a recently made Wizards of the Coast troll right here. It's pretty cool. It's artwork right out of the book, but this is hands down my favorite troll miniature. This is a Pathfinder troll. I believe it's from Skull and Shackles. Don't quote me on that, but it's huge. These are both large-sized creatures, as you can see from the size of their base, but this one is just so much more imposing. He takes up a lot of visual space. He's taller, he's bulkier. Yeah, I really like that troll miniature. I have several of them. And so yeah, something else to look forward to at high level are the trolls and the ogres. Alright, and last but not least, I'm going to talk a little bit about elementals and constructs. Now again, these are going to be enemies your party will be facing at much higher levels. I wouldn't throw a full-sized elemental unless it was a little baby at a low-level party at all. Now, one thing to help you kind of save money when trying to find elemental miniatures is really you just need a couple of each size. That's really the big deciding factor on how powerful an elemental is what size category they are. So in the front, you can see I've got just these little bitty baby elementals. I could use those as mephits or just small elementals. A variety of Pathfinder, Reaper, and D&D ones up there. Then I've got medium-sized ones. I've got the rock, air, water, and fire. For the larger size, we've got water, air, rock, fire, a couple nice examples of the Reaper kind of transparent plastic for fire and water. Another large-sized rock. Here in the center, you got a big stone golem. Now over here is some Mage Knight, kind of iron golem looking miniatures. Mage Knight is a treasure trove of really cool looking mechanical construct things. If you find those on eBay and put them on a normal size base, you're going to have a bunch of really cool metal guardians or statues come to life, or just classic iron golems. Then I like to kind of include the plant world in the elemental subtype. So I've got a treant in the back there. I've actually modified mine with some kind of train track, tree terrain to make him look even bigger and more tree-like. And then I've got a Zugtmoy, classic villain from Temple of Elemental Evil. She would work great as kind of a Myconid queen or any kind of like fungus or plant-themed spellcaster. So these are some good examples. Really just having a few of each size is really all you need. I don't know that I've ever needed to use more than a couple large elementals of a certain type at a time. But it could change depending on what your story's doing. That's a great way to start, though. So this has been another Miniature Minute. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have ideas for more Miniature Minute videos, I've only shown you a very small portion of my collection and only shared a small fraction of my thoughts and ideas on the topic of miniatures. So please let me know, and thanks for following us on Facebook's D&D Memes.